Hello everybody, welcome to Sir Chua's Accounting Lessons PH, and this is Lecture 9, Accounting for Manufacturing Overhead. At the end of the video, you should be able to calculate predetermined overhead rates, allocate service department costs using direct step and algebraic method, and close material and immaterial overhead variances. This is your lecturer, Kevin Troy M. Chua. Before anything else, please like, share, and subscribe to Sir Chua's Accounting Lessons PH and hit the notification bell button to alert you of the latest video lessons. For all of your questions, comments, and suggestions, please put them down in the comment section below. And for webinar and speakership invites, please send me a message at kevintroy.chua1994@gmail.com. Thank you very much for your utmost support for Sir Chua's Accounting Lessons PH. And may these videos continue to help students in their online learning and academic development. May these videos continue to help teachers in enhancing their lesson plans and teaching methodologies. Thank you very much for trusting Sir Chua's Accounting Lessons PH as your online learning partner. Maraming salamat po. In the last lesson, we discussed about payroll, and we actually specifically had a payroll workshop. So now we are ready to discuss the third of the trio magkakapatid of materials, labor, and overhead, which is none other than manufacturing overhead. Manufacturing overhead includes all costs incurred in the production process. So lahat po talaga ay ginagastos natin during the production process na hindi po direct materials or direct labor. Okay, so basically, dahil hindi siya direct materials at hindi rin siya direct labor, so ano siya? Lahat ng indirect cost. Okay, basically, manufacturing overhead is actually not directly traceable to the products completed. Kumbaga, it's not really traceable to the products, pero always remember that it is still necessary to be incurred to convert raw materials to finished goods. Hindi mo man siya directly makita or matrace dun sa produkto, you need to incur those costs because it also helps in the conversion of raw materials to make it or for it to become finished goods. Okay, so let's have some examples of manufacturing overhead. Actually, this is not new to you already because these concepts had been discussed with you in the previous lessons, but for more appreciation, let's go back to them. So for example, lahat po ng ating indirect materials, which includes your glue, your tape, your fasteners, your cleaning supplies, and your oils. Hindi man sila po direktang yun yung nakikita natin sa ating mga products, but these glue, tapes, fasteners ay kailangan pa rin po sila para mabuo natin yung produkto. Although directly, hindi po natin siya nakikita dun sa produkto. Okay? And then also, indirect labor, for example, the salary of factory supervisors or the janitor in the factory. So, hindi man po sila mismo yung gumawa ng ating products, is kailangan pa rin po natin yung service ng ating mga factory supervisors, quality control inspectors, yan, the janitors po natin sa factory, yung mga personnel po natin inside the factory. Pinapasahod po natin lahat sila. Hindi man po sila yung diretsong gumagawa ng mga produkto, pinapasahod po natin sila because they are still part of the manufacturing process. And again, even though hindi po sila yung mismong gumagawa ng produkto, pinapasahod natin sila as part of nung mismong production process. Okay? And then we also have factory insurance. So let's say, for example, that the manufacturing facility is owned by the company at hindi po nila pinaparentahan, baka po pina-insure nila from fire, from any other catastrophe. So yung gastos po natin sa insurance sa factory is also part of your overhead. Syempre po, ang ating pong mga equipment and machineries and all other fixed assets na ginagamit in the production process in the factory, nagde-depreciate po yon. So the amount of depreciation will also become part of your overhead. And then we also have the repairs and maintenance of your factory assets. Syempre po, minsan nasisira yan, kailangan i-repair. And para maganda ang performance ng ating mga assets, kailangan po natin ng maintenance sa kanila. So kasama po sa overhead yung ginagastos po natin for the repairs and maintenance of the assets that we use in the production process. In any case that we are renting facilities or we are renting our equipment or machineries, the rent associated associated or the rental costs associated with those ay kasama po sa overhead. And then syempre po, yung ating pong mga utilities like water and electricity that we pay inside the factory facility. Yung ginagamit po natin during the production process, that will also become part of your manufacturing overhead. Okay, so for you to review concepts of overhead variances and normal costing system, you can go back po sa ating lecture 4, which is normal costing and allocation of overhead variance na lesson. Okay, yun lamang po. Maraming salamat. This is our lesson. Thank you very much and have a great day. Joke lang po. Okay, sige. So, but if you need to go back po sa ating normal costing na concept, kasi nandun po, di ba, yung mga actual and applied overhead natin. Tapos, paano po ba natin ina-allocate sa cost of goods sold? Or paano po natin kino-close yung overhead variance sa cost of goods sold? Nandyan po kasi yon sa lecture niya. So, you may go back to that para po mas strengthen natin yung understanding natin about overhead. Okay? But, if you're ready to listen for this lesson, then no problem. Let's continue. Okay, so predetermined overhead rate. Bakit po ba tayo gumagamit ng normal costing system? Bakit po ba tayo nagkakaroon ng applied overhead? At bakit po tayo naggagamit ng predetermined overhead rate? Number 1, it allows an entity to get immediate cost information for decision making and pricing decisions without the need to wait for actual overhead cost, which takes time to accumulate. So if you will be waiting for the total actual overhead cost, it would delay your decision making. It would delay your pricing decisions. So kapag po gumagamit tayo ng normal costing and predetermined overhead rate, mas mabilis po tayong makakagawa ng decisions about prices and mabilis po nating malalaman yung cost ng isang product. Tsaka na lang natin i-adjust pag alam na natin yung talagang actual overhead cost. Adjust na lang tayo ng variances for financial reporting purposes. Number 2, when overhead rates are predetermined, it allows uniform costing whatever season or circumstance the company is into. Ito po yung example ko na sa inyo dati, diba? So, hindi naman po pwede na, let's say for example, summer operations, mas malakas gumamit ng air conditioner yung factory kesa sa tag-ulan or sa ibang bansa winter operations, 'di ba? So parang ang dating mas mataas ang utilities, factory utilities natin kapag ka summer ang operations. Hindi naman po pwede na kapag ka summer dahil mataas ang ating cost of production because higher ang overhead, mas mataas din ang presyo natin. Tapos pagdating po natin ng winter, mas mababa yung presyo just because of that. Okay, so kapag po gumagamit tayo ng predetermined overhead rate, whatever circumstance, whatever season it is, the company can still have uniform costing. Okay, and basically uniform costing contributes to uniform pricing decisions. Number 3, within the relevant range, there will be no problems on fluctuations of activity levels and the cost related thereunto. So, either you make 1,000 or you make 3,000 units, no problem because your application of overhead is uniform. Okay? But remember that it's only valid within the relevant range. So, alam niyo naman na po, di ba, yung ibig sabihin ng relevant range. Okay, so again, to get the predetermined overhead rate, kung ano man po yung budgeted overhead cost natin, we divide it on the specified volume of activity. Okay, remember that overhead and activity levels are budgeted by an entity for the whole accounting period. So, yung ating pong predetermined overhead rate is based on budgeted amounts muna. Okay? Tapos, pag nagkakaroon na po ng actual production, ina-apply natin yung kung ano mang predetermined overhead rate na nakuha natin. Tapos, sa dulo na lang tayo mag-a-adjust para makabalik tayo sa actual costing. Dahil, syempre, ang requirement po ng generally accepted accounting principles for financial reporting purposes is, syempre, talagang actual cost ng product. Okay? And then, the numerator and denominator po ng ating pagkuha ng predetermined overhead rate is hindi naman po yan basta-basta kino-compute lang. It's being studied well, galing po saan? Management estimates, past actual production or past experiences of the entity and other bases and targets. Now that we have mentioned about other bases and targets, let's talk about those. Okay? Predetermined overhead rates can be developed by an entity from a number of bases, some of which are pwede pong galing sa material cost, sa cost of direct labor, or sa number of hours po ng direct labor, or the machine hours and units of production, or the number of units to be produced by an entity. Okay, so let's try that. So long a company has made the following budgeted information, take note of the word, it's budgeted, available, applicable for the next production year. So we have estimated overhead of 500,000, and then the cost of materials is 800,000. Direct labor is 1,200,000 based on 192,000 direct labor hours. Machine hours is 150,000 machine hours, and the estimated number of units to produce for the next production year is 100,000 units. Calculate the predetermined overhead rate na gagamitin natin for the application of the overhead based on the different bases. Okay, so coming from that information, the first base na pwede po natin gamitin is based on materials. So, kung ang ating pong estimated manufacturing overhead is 500,000, you just divide it versus the cost of materials, which is 800,000. Your application rate is 62.5%. Ano po ang interpretation natin? Kapag ka po nag-actual operations na tayo, kung magkano po yung direct materials used at that time, get the 62.5% of those materials, yun na po ang ating applied manufacturing overhead. Okay, ganun po siya. How about this one? Pwede din po siyang nakabase sa cost of direct labor. So, 500,000 manufacturing overhead, divide po natin sa 1,200,000 na cost of direct labor. The overhead application rate is 41.67%. Ibig sabihin po, sa actual operations po natin, kung magkano yung direct labor cost, i-multiply mo ng 41.67%, yun na po ang ating applied manufacturing overhead. Kung hindi naman po sa mismong direct labor cost, dun naman po tayo sa direct labor hours. Based on hours po tayo. So, yung 500,000 nating estimated manufacturing overhead, you divide it by the number of budgeted direct labor hours for the period coming, which is 192,000. Ang overhead application rate natin is 2 pesos and 60 centavos. Ibig sabihin po, sa actual operations natin, kung ilan po yung direct labor hours na nagamit, you multiply it by 2 pesos and 60 centavos, yun na po ang ating applied manufacturing overhead. Pwede rin po sa machine hours. So, ganun din po. Kung ano po yung ating estimated manufacturing overhead, you divide it po sa atin pong number of hours na nagamit yung machine, okay, which is 3 pesos and 33 centavos. Ibig sabihin po, sa actual operations natin, kung ilan yung machine hours, i-multiply mo lang ng 3 pesos and 33 centavos, yun na po yung ating applied manufacturing overhead. And lastly, pwede rin po, syempre, sa number of units na mapoproduce natin. So, let's say, for example, ang binudget ng company is 100,000 units yung magagawa nila for the next period, 5 pesos per unit yung i-apply nating manufacturing overhead. Okay? But again, it's all based on applied manufacturing overhead. Yung kino-compute natin dito na predetermined overhead rate is pang-apply natin ng manufacturing overhead under normal costing system. Okay? But remember that variances between overhead balances are being closed and adjusted at the end of the accounting period para makabalik po tayo sa actual costs ng product. Okay, lahat po ng kinompute natin according to De Leon, and De Leon is, ang tinatawag po natin doon ay plant-wide rate. Okay, isang rate lang po ang ginagamit sa buong production process. All departments in the company will use the same application rate for manufacturing overhead in the same base. Saan po applicable ang plant-wide rate? When the entity manufactures only a single product or kahit po different products pero yung dinadaanan nilang manufacturing process, halos same series lang po. Okay? Katulad ng ice cream na iba-iba yung flavor. O ice cream pa rin naman yun, di ba? Iba-ibang product lang kasi iba-iba na siya. Merong naka-cone, merong naka-tub, but it's actually just the same series of productive departments. Okay, so applicable po ang plant-wide rate kung wala pong ganong variation sa atin pong manufacturing process. However, if a plant-wide rate is not applicable, then you use a departmental rate. An entity shall use a departmental rate when different products are being manufactured. So you cannot use the same application rate for a candy when you're also manufacturing a pencil. Ang layo, di ba? Okay? So departmental rates are applicable when products do not pass through the same series or steps of conversion, or there is a need for a dissimilar application of overhead depending on company circumstances and attention given to the product. So, depende po talaga sa operations natin kung ano yung gagamitin natin, kung plant-wide rate ba or departmental rate. Now, always remember, when the company will be using departmental rates is kailangan po nating i-compute ang predetermined overhead rate on a department-by-department basis conforming to each of the activities of the entity. Okay? Again, kapag ka po iba-iba yung pinoproduce natin product or iba-iba po yung company circumstances or production processes, kailangan po natin gamitin as departmental rate. And departmental rate is being obtained by getting the predetermined overhead rate on a department-by-department basis. Okay, now let's talk about service department cost. Service or support department is a unit in an organization specifically still related to the manufacturing process that contributes in a very indirect way to the conversion of raw materials to finished goods. Best example, mayroong cafeteria or canteen sa loob ng factory facility para magpahinga yung mga trabahador. Overhead pa rin yun, di ba? They are, however, and still involved in producing goods. These departments, for example po niyan, yung purchasing department, sa mga yung nagpa-purchase po ng raw materials natin, personnel department, warehousing department, tsaka maintenance department. So, lahat po yan ay related pa rin sa manufacturing processes, although service na po ang nire-render nila, di ba? Okay. Since these departments support the production process, the cost incurred in these departments should be allocated din po sa ating production departments, and dapat po makasama rin siya sa cost ng product po natin. Kasi nasanay po tayo in cost accounting that we only look upon the cost that is being incurred in production. But actually, there are support costs or service costs po na ginagastos din yung company na actually related din po sa ating pong manufacturing process. Kailangan po natin siyang i-take into consideration din pong mabuti. Okay, so we have the following methods of allocation of service department cost. The first method is direct method. It is a direct allocation of the service cost to the production department. Kung magkano po yung ating service cost na nagastos for a certain period, or should I say, no, actually this is about budgets kasi we're still talking about predetermined overhead rate kasi. Okay, so kung magkano man po yung service cost na na-budget during the period, yun po yung i-allocate natin sa production department to get the predetermined overhead rate. Okay, later, you'll understand it better pag may numbers na. So, pag direct method po, direct lang po ang allocation. From the service cost, i-allocate mo diretso sa production department. Pag step method po, or the sequential method, the cost of the initially ranked service department affects the cost of the secondarily ranked service department before allocation of cost to the production department. So, kung ano po yung service na mararank na mas may pakinabang sa production process, siya po yung initially ranked service department, and then magkakaroon po ng yung cost niya is magkakaroon din ng effect dun po sa secondarily ranked service department bago po siya tuluyang i-allocate sa lahat po ng production department costs. And then lastly is algebraic method, is gagamit po tayo ng mathematical cost functions, yun yung mga favorite nyo. Okay, in allocating the service costs. Okay, so let's try allocating them and let's use this problem. Credits to Professor Gloria Rante for her textbook Cost Accounting. I'm using the 2013 edition, the book that I had during college. I love you, ma'am. I miss you po. Okay. Solis Manufacturing has 4 departments: assembly department and finishing department make up the production departments, while cafeteria and maintenance department make up the service departments. The overhead cost of the cafeteria, paano daw po ina-allocate? Based on the number of employees. So, meron po ditong number of employees sa baba. Yan daw po ang allocation basis natin pagdating sa cafeteria. While the overhead cost of the maintenance department is based on the estimated overhead for the period. So, dito po daw po sa estimated factory overhead. In determining the predetermined overhead rates, the assembly department uses, so pag kinukuha naman daw po yung predetermined overhead rates, sa assembly department daw po is the direct labor hours. So ito po yun, DLH, direct labor hours, and the finishing department uses machine hours. The following information is made available. So, meron po tayong estimated factory overhead for cafeteria is 250,000, maintenance is 150,000, then assembly is 100,000, and 600,000 for finishing. And then we have the following direct labor hours na estimated, machine hours na estimated, and the number of employees associated in each of the departments. Allocate the service department cost using direct method, sequential, or step method, and algebraic method. Okay, let's start with direct method. Pag direct method po, coming from the word itself, diretso lang siya. Kung ano po yung allocation basis natin, ganun lang po natin siya i-allocate. Okay, so gagawa po kayo ng table na ganyan. So, ililista nyo po yung estimated factory overhead both on assembly and finishing department. For the assembly department, the estimated overhead is 100,000, and for the finishing department, the estimated overhead is 60,000. Okay? Yan po yung starting point natin kasi po kahit anong pagbalik-balik rin natin ang sitwasyon, yan na po yung budgeted overhead natin for assembly and finishing. I-allocate na lang po natin si cafeteria at saka si maintenance. Let's start with allocating our cafeteria cost allocation, which is 250,000. Ano pong sabi sa problem? Ina-allocate daw po ang cafeteria cost base sa number of employees. So, for the assembly department, ganito po ang equation natin. 250,000 na cafeteria cost, you multiply it to 1,500 employees divided by 2,500 employees. Saan po galing yung 2,500 employees? 1,500 ni assembly at saka 1,000 ni finishing for a total of 2,500. Okay? So, 15 over 25 po ang magiging multiplier natin sa 250,000. Kaya po tinawag na direct method, direkta mo lang siyang i-allocate. So, for assembly department is 150,000. You do the same for finishing department, which is 250,000 multiplied by 1,000 naman po. Ito po yun, 1,000 employees divided by the total number of employees in the production process, which is 2,500 employees. So, you just simply multiply this and you get 100,000. So, magpapantay po yan, 150 plus 100, yun po yung inallocate nating 250. So, tapos na po tayo mag-allocate from the cafeteria costs. Doon naman po tayo sa maintenance cost. Okay, pag maintenance cost naman po is nakabase daw po ang allocation niya on the estimated factory overhead that period. So, kung sa assembly po is 100,000 and sa finishing po is 60,000, ang ating pong total factory overhead sa production process is 160,000. Yun po yung magiging multiplier natin. So, for assembly po, 150,000, you multiply it by the factory overhead in assembly, which is 100,000, over the total of 160,000, which gives you 93,750. And then, for finishing naman po, same way, 150,000 times 60,000 naman po galing sa finishing, divided by the total of 160,000, that is 56,250. So, ang nangyari po sa atin ngayon sa direct method is na-allocate na po natin sa cafeteria. na-allocate na rin po natin si maintenance cost. You just get the total. The total estimated factory overhead in the assembly department is 343,750. In the finishing department naman po is 216,250. Now, let's compute for the predetermined overhead rate based on their rate basis. Ang sabi po sa assembly is ginagamit po natin is direct labor hours. So you simply divide it by 200,000 direct labor hours, and para naman po sa finishing is machine hours na 250,000. So your predetermined overhead rate for the assembly department is 1 peso and 72 centavos, while for finishing is 87 centavos. Okay? Yan po ang ating allocation using direct method. This is the easiest and the most useful method in practice. Okay, let's proceed to sequential method or step method. Pag step method po, si cafeteria, babahaginan mo muna si maintenance. Tapos si maintenance, babahaginan mo na si assembly tsaka si finishing. Ganun po siya ha. Okay, let's start. So, ganun din po uli. But this time, yung heading natin, dahil mababahaginan din po muna si maintenance, kasama po si maintenance sa calculation agad. Okay? So, the maintenance factory overhead is 150,000. Then, again, for assembly is 100,000. And for finishing is 60,000. Pagka po ngayon tayo ay nag-allocate na ng cost ng cafeteria, kasama po si maintenance sa lahat ng allocation natin. Remember that the allocation for cafeteria is based on the number of employees. So, kung kanina, 1,500 at 1,000 lang, which is equal to 2,500, dahil mag-allocate na rin po tayo ngayon kay maintenance, you will also add the 20 employees from the maintenance department, which will total 2,520. Okay. So, your allocation of 250,000 times 20 employees over 2,520, yun po yung 20 employees applicable for maintenance. Okay? And then, cafeteria cost naman po natin na 250,000 times 1,500 po sa assembly divided by 2,520. Yun na po yun sa assembly, 148,809.52. And then, sa atin naman pong finishing is 250,000 times 1,000 divided by 2,520. Sa finishing naman po yan, 99,206.35. Get po muna natin yung total after po nating i-allocate si cafeteria cost. Okay? So, this is for your maintenance, this is for your assembly and finishing. Okay? Ngayon po, pag sequential method, dahil nabahagi na po natin si maintenance ng cost galing kay cafeteria, ang gagamitin po natin is hindi na po yung 150,000 yung i-allocate natin. What we will be allocating is the overhead after we have already allocated the cafeteria cost. Okay? Now, remember that the allocation of maintenance cost is based on factory overhead. However, we are now only talking about the production process here, which is 100,000 and 60,000. So, your base would just still be 160,000. Okay. So, for distribution po natin yung 151,984.13. So, wala na po tayong i-allocate sa maintenance kasi siya yung mismo ipamimigay natin. So, 151,984.13 times 100,000 from the assembly department. Again, all over 160,000. Yan po yan sa assembly department natin na 94,990.08. And then, doon naman po sa finishing department, 151,984.13 times 60,000 over 160,000, 56,994.05. Okay? Pag pinag-add nyo po itong dalawang to, yan po yun. Yung 151,984.13. So, coming from that po, i-add nyo lang po uli lahat ng na-allocate sa assembly at sa finishing and you will get your total estimated factory overhead. Dating gawi po, you can divide it by your predetermined overhead rate base, which is your direct labor hours, and your machine hours. And this is your predetermined overhead application rate. 1 peso and 72 centavos for assembly and 86 centavos for finishing. And that is what we call sequential method. Dito naman po tayo sa last step, which is algebraic method. Ang algebraic method po is gagamit po tayo ng mathematical cost functions or yung mga equations. Okay? So the first thing that you need to do is to calculate for percentages of allocation. Okay, again, remember na ang atin pong cafeteria is nakabase sa number of employees. Siyempre, yung mismong cafeteria ay hindi mo kukumputan ng sarili niyang percentage dahil siya ang mag-allocate sa sarili niya eh. I-allocate natin yung 250,000. So, you cannot allocate anything on yourself na. Okay? Now, the cafeteria percentage will be based on employees. So, paano po nakuha yung 0.79%? You just divide pala. 20 employees divided by 2,520 employees. This one, and this one. Okay? Paano naman po nakuha yung 59.52%? 1,500 employees divided by 2,520 employees. So, you know the drill here sa finishing. 1,000 employees divided by 2,520 employees. Sa maintenance naman po is nakabase po sa overhead cost. Yun nga lang po, kanina po kasi pag direct method, kung ano yung cafeteria cost, diretso na sa assembly finishing. Kung ano yung maintenance cost, diretso na sa assembly and finishing. Kapag ka naman po step method, yung cafeteria, bibigyan mo muna si maintenance, tas meron na rin si assembly tsaka si finishing. Tapos, pagdating naman kay maintenance, bibigay mo na kay assembly and finishing na lang. Pag algebraic method po, magbibigayan silang dalawa. Okay? Magbibigayan si cafeteria at si maintenance. So, kasama po si cafeteria sa lalagyan mo ng percentage. Okay? Maintenance percentages based on overhead cost. Paano po nakuha yung 60.98? Based on overhead cost po. So, 250 plus 100 plus 60. Okay? So, 250 divided by 410, yun po yung 60.98%. Wala po sa maintenance kasi siya nga po yung i-allocate. For assembly naman po is 100 divided by 410, which is 24.39%. And kay finishing naman po is 60 over 410, which is 14.63. Magbibigayan po sa isa't isa ng cost si cafeteria at saka si maintenance. Now that you have already prepared your percentages, you can now make the cost function. Okay? Cafeteria cost is equals to 250,000 plus 60.98% of your maintenance cost. And then, for maintenance is 150,000 plus 0.79% ng cafeteria cost. As you can see, C has a component of M and M has a component of C. Kasi nga po, magbibigayan sila ng cost bago natin siya i-allocate. Okay? Let's solve now for C first. Ganito po ang solving for C natin. 250,000 plus 60.98% M. But M is represented by 150,000 plus 0.79% C. So, isa-substitute po natin si M based sa kung ano si M na equation, which is 150,000 plus 0.79 C. Okay? So, that will be 250,000 plus 60.98% multiplied by 150,000 is 91,470 plus 60.98% multiplied by 0.79% C is 0.0048 C. Okay? Tinanggal ko na po yung percentage sign. Ginawa ko na po siyang decimal format. Okay? Then, transpose C to the other side para magsama yung dalawang C. C minus 0.0048C is 341,470. Perform the equation. 0.9952C is 341,470. Divide both sides by 0.9952 to get C. Your C is equals to 343,116.96. Yan po ang ating cafeteria cost na i-allocate kay assembly and finishing mamaya. Ngayon, dito naman po tayo sa M. Ang M po natin is 150,000 plus 0.79C. Meron na tayong amount ng C. So, you just substitute it. 150,000 plus 0.79% ng 343,116.96. Yun po yung C. Ito po yun. Okay? So, 0.79% of 3,116.96 is 2,710.62. Add it to 150,000. Your total M or maintenance cost to be allocated to assembly and finishing is 152,710.62. So, pareho po si C at si M ay may component na ng M at ng C sa isa't isa bago po natin siya i-allocate. Now that you have your C and your M, we can now allocate them. Ganito lang po ang allocation, madali lang. Okay? So, kung ano po uli yung estimated factory overhead, yun pa rin po ang starting point natin. And let's start with your cafeteria cost allocation. 343,116.96, multiply na po natin siya sa cafeteria percentage based on assembly, which is 59.52%. You do the same for finishing, 343,116.96 sa cafeteria percentage naman sa finishing na 39.68%. Perform the percentages, ito po ang lalabas na amount. Okay? Pag maintenance cost naman po, ito po yun, 152,17.62. Mumultiply po natin siya sa maintenance percentage ng overhead based sa assembly, which is 24.39%. And then again, 152,17.62 times 14.63%. Saan po galing yan? Maintenance percentage naman po na related sa finishing, 14.63%. Perform nyo lang din po yung percentages. Get the total. So, the estimated factory overhead for assembly is 341,469.33 and for finishing is 218,490.37. You divide it by the basis of the predetermined overhead rates. The application rate of overhead for assembly is 1 peso and 71 centavos, while for finishing is 87 centavos. Now, let's compare the three. As you can see po, wala silang ganong pinagkaiba. Hindi sila ganong nagkakalayo, di ba? Okay? So, yun po. But actually po, ang mas ginagamit for its simplicity is syempre direct method. But if you really want to be more certain na talagang medyo certain yung paglalagay mo ng amounts, dito tayo sa algebraic method. Kasi si cafeteria, nagbibigay muna kay maintenance ng cost. And then si maintenance, nagbibigay ng cost kay cafeteria. Parang maayos natin siyang nai-allocate bago pumunta kay assembly and finishing. But as you can see, if you will be comparing the three, all of those are nearly the same. So in examinations, you know that you did it correctly when the three is pare-pareho halos. Okay, that's nice. Okay, remember, balikan po natin yung T account natin for overhead. Remember na ang dinedebit po natin sa manufacturing overhead is yung atin pong actual overhead. Lahat naman po ng credit natin is your applied overhead. If you are using actual costing system, kung ano po yung actual overhead, yun po ang kinecredit nyo rin po as applied overhead. Okay? But if normal costing system, we are using your predetermined overhead rate, depending on the situation. Okay, so with the use of actual costing, remember that actual overhead is equal to applied overhead, since the amount of your actual overhead is the one being applied to production and you cannot expect any overhead variance because the actual overhead is being applied in production. So, wala po tayong variance. Kailan po nagkakaroon ng variance? Sa normal costing. Actual overhead differs from applied overhead since the MOH account is debited for your actual overhead but the MOH account is credited in the amount of overhead na in-apply nyo po sa production. So, pwede pong sumobra kayo ng application or over-applied overhead or medyo kulang kayo ng na-apply na overhead, under-applied overhead. Okay, so if actual overhead is greater than your applied overhead, the T account of your overhead account, debit, ay mas malaki kesa sa credit. Overhead, at the end of the period before adjustments, dahil po mas malaki yung actual at mas maliit si applied, under-applied po ang tawag doon. But if your actual overhead is less than the applied overhead, so the T account debit is mas maliit naman po sa T account credit. Overhead at the end of the period naman po, dahil mas malaki si applied overhead, over-applied po yon. If the overhead variance is immaterial, you can just close it against cost of goods sold. If the variance is under-applied, tataas ang cost of goods sold. When you close it yung account natin ng manufacturing overhead. But if the variance is over-applied, cost of goods sold decreases. Patunayan natin yung mga sentence na to using these examples. Okay, dito muna tayo sa over-applied overhead. Let's assume that your actual overhead is 35,000 and your applied overhead is 40,000. So as you can see po, mas malaki yung applied overhead, kaya po siya over-applied overhead, di ba? Yung nandito po sa side na to is actual costing system. What if daw po nag-actual costing system tayo? So kita naman po, actual overhead na ginamit is 35,000. Dito naman po sa kabila, same perspective, same amounts, except na yung ating pong overhead ay syempre ginamitan natin ng applied overhead, 40,000. Now, the cost of goods sold under actual costing system is 95,000. Under normal costing system, it's 100,000. However, we need to close your variance, diba? As you can see, your applied overhead is 40,000. So, meron po tayong 5,000 na kailangang i-debit para magpantay na po yung T-account natin ng overhead at mag-zero na siya para ma-close na natin yung overhead. So, debit manufacturing overhead for 5,000 pero ang kabangga niya is cost of goods sold 5,000. Dahil kinredit natin sa cost of goods sold, ima-minus natin yung over-applied overhead. 100,000 pesos po na cost of goods sold galing sa normal costing, less over-applied overhead na variance po natin. We can go back to your adjusted cost of goods sold of 95,000, which is your cost of goods sold under actual costing system. Okay? Kapag ka naman po under-applied ang overhead, mas maliit po si applied overhead. Same scenario, 95,000 in actual costing, pero nung normal costing, ang ginamit na overhead is 30,000, kaya nauwi tayo sa normal costing na cost of goods sold na 90,000. In your T account, as you can see, ang applied po natin is 30,000. So, kulang naman tayo ng 5,000 sa credit para ma-close na natin yung T account ng overhead. Okay? So, i-credit natin ngayon si manufacturing overhead na 5,000. Ang kabangga naman niya is si cost of goods sold. Okay? So, kapag ka under-applied yung overhead natin, you will be adding your under-applied overhead na 5,000. Okay? So, 90 plus 5 is 95. Okay? So, from your normal costing system, you can go back to your actual costing system na cost of goods sold. Okay? That's how we do it, yung ating pong overhead variance kung immaterial. What about if your overhead variance is material? The amount of variance is closed and prorated against the accounts in which applied overhead resides. Saan po ba tayo merong applied overhead? Doon sa work in process, sa finished goods, at sa cost of goods sold. Diyan po sa tatlo natin i-close kapag ang overhead variance ay material. Okay, let's try po yung sinasabi natin ganyan. Yeji Manufacturing has the following account balances at the end of the period with their materials, labor, and overhead components. So, ito po yung ending balance natin ng work in process inventory with manufacturing overhead of 104,400. Ito naman po yung finished goods inventory natin with manufacturing overhead of 208,800. And ito naman po yung cost of goods sold natin with manufacturing overhead of 1,183,200. Now, in our scenario, meron po tayong over-applied na overhead variance. Again, paano po natin i-analyze yan? Dahil over-applied po siya, mas malaki po si credit, kaya kailangan nating i-debit itong variance na ito para mag-close na yung manufacturing overhead. Ang tanong, paano ang entry kung kailangan nating i-allocate dito sa tatlong to dahil material yung variance. Okay? So, this is what we do. The first thing is you get all of the overhead components of work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold. Okay, so for your work in process, it's 104,400. Finished goods is 208,800, and cost of goods sold is 1,832,200. Get the percentages. Paano po kunin yung percentages? 104,400 divided by 1,496,400, that's 6.98%. And then for finished goods po is 208,800 divided by 1,496,400, 13.95%. And then 1,183,200 divided by 1,496,400 is 79.07%. Now, if you already have your allocation percentages, and then you can also multiply them. Okay? So, yung variance po natin ng 96,400 times 6.98%, 6,725.58 po ang allocate natin sa work in process. For finished goods, you do the same scenario or the same calculation, 13.95% naman po. And sa cost of goods sold is 79.07%. Okay? So, what happens is that ang magiging entry mo po is tatanggalin mo na po sa manufacturing overhead na 96,400, and then you credit na po tigi-tigisa dun sa mga account balances, which is credit work in process inventory of 6,725.58, finished goods inventory of 13,451.16, and cost of goods sold of 76,223.26. So, hindi na lang po siya diretso sa cost of goods sold. Affected na po lahat ng account balances na may lamang overhead. That will be your adjusting and closing entry, closing entry to close your manufacturing overhead. Pag material po, damay na po lahat ng account title na may lamang overhead. Okay, and that's the end of our lesson for today. And our next lesson is activity-based management and activity-based costing. Again, please like, share, and subscribe to Sir Chua's Accounting Lessons PH, and hit the notification bell button to alert you of the latest video lessons. For all of your questions, comments, and suggestions, please put them down in the comment section below. And for webinar and speakership invites, please send me a message at kevintroy1994@gmail.com. This has been Sir Chua's Accounting Lessons PH College Edition. To God be all the glory, honor, and praise. Thank you and have a great day. Sarangeo.